And I would like to express my gratitude to the organisers of this great event, to express the apologies of our sister Yvonne Ridley, who literally is unable to leave her house in London because not a bus, not a train, not an aeroplane is moving from the capital. I want to express my apologies that I must leave after my speech because I have to drive back to London in order to meet the Algerian ambassador early tomorrow morning for reasons which I will come to later. But this is a truly epic event into which great efforts have been put, and may God reward the organisers for these efforts with a major financial expression of people's support in the fundraising which is a part of this evening. Today I will have spoken, by the time I sleep, at 4 separate events in 3 different cities. And I am detecting, and this meeting shows me that I'm not wrong, an intifada in the north of England in support of Palestine, an uprising in the north of England in support of Palestine. In Bolton last Monday at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, I addressed a meeting of more than 1,000 people. A television station that we used to call the British Broadcasting Corporation, which we then were forced to call the Bush and Blair Corporation, and what has now become the bloody biased corporation. A bloody biased corporation which has the gall to tell us that it cannot broadcast a charitable appeal from the most respected charitable organizations in the country on behalf of the devastated people of Gaza, because that would be to call into question its impartiality. Is there anybody in this land who believes the BBC is impartial on anything to do with Israel after the coverage that we saw this last 4 weeks? They said that to broadcast this appeal would prejudice their impartiality, which means, by any understanding of the English language, that they are accusing Channel 4 and Channel 5 and ITV, which did broadcast the appeal, of being partial, of being biased. It's accusing the other broadcasters of having lower standards of impartiality than them. Then they said, well, how do we know that the money raised from the appeal will reach the suffering people of Gaza and be properly spent? This is an insult to charities with together more than 100 years of experience in dealing with disasters, both natural and man-made. They said, the BBC, that maybe Hamas would get their hands on this money. Well, the last time I looked, the Save the Children Fund's patron was Her Royal Highness Princess Anne, and I don't think she's a member of Hamas. Christian Aid is the charity of the Christian churches throughout this land. I don't think they're supporters of Hamas. Oxfam is the most famous charitable organization on the earth, capable of rushing to people's aid everywhere in the world, and does not deserve this imputed bias. But I want to talk about Hamas, because those policemen that were killed on the first day of Israel's aggression against Gaza, 200 of them were killed in 1 minute in their police stations, built by us, the taxpayers of Britain and the European Union, whose money was spent building those police stations. 200 Palestinian policemen were killed in 1 minute in a coordinated series of bombing raids by Israel on the first day, the 27th of December. These were the very same Palestinian policemen who rescued the BBC correspondent Alan Johnson from his criminal incarceration by extortionists. At the time, the BBC thanked those policemen for risking their lives to save the life of the BBC's correspondent. But when they were wiped out in 1 minute, in their hundreds, they were to be regarded as Hamas militants or terrorists, about whose death it would be wrong to be other than impartial. So, you want to be impartial between the victims of aggression and the perpetrators of aggression? This rabbi here, his family, and the families of almost all of European Jewry were wiped out by the Nazis in the Holocaust of the 1940s. Were we impartial between the concentration camp guards and the victims in the camps? Should we be impartial when we see injustice? It is our duty to be partial, to be on the side of the victim and against the criminal who's causing the suffering of those victims. They talk about Hamas as if it were some criminal conspiracy, while in fact Hamas were the victors of the only free and fair election ever held in any Arab country at any time. From the Atlantic to the Gulf, they have never seen a free election except in Palestine, and Hamas won it. And what was the answer of the so-called international community? It was to immediately place the Palestinian people under siege, to allow Israel to steal the tax revenues, 9 tax revenues, and keep them for themselves rather than allow them to arrive in the treasury of the Palestinian government, so-called government, national authority, to seal the borders, to let nothing in except under their control, to let nobody out, even if they were sick and in need of medical attention, to let no one out to study, locking a generation of Palestinian students from their right to seek education in neighboring Arab countries or beyond, and to regularly bomb and kill Palestinians at will. That's been the reality of the Palestinian life since they had the misfortune to have voted democratically for a government that Israel, the United States, and Britain didn't like.